Hello and welcome to the Supercast. I'm your host, Superintendent Anthony Godfrey. Jessi Morton-Langehaug is a passionate educator, athlete, ultramarathon runner, and parent. On this episode of the Supercast, the Herriman High School teacher talks about inspiring students by sharing her personal story with them. Jessi went undiagnosed with Lyme disease for 10 years and was told she would never run or compete again because her body was too damaged. Hear how Jessi defied the odds, not only competing again, but recently winning the Moab 240. That's right, 240 miles, with the fourth fastest time in history. Jessi's story is one of hope and inspiration as we begin the new year. Jessi, I'm just going to ask you to kind of list off some of the amazing things that you're up to. Let's start with teaching.
Yeah, so hi, I teach chemistry, AP chemistry, honors chemistry, regular chemistry, and yoga at Herriman High School. And a hobby is I love to run. So I like ultra marathons the most, but I've ran Boston Marathon 3 times. I've done Chicago. I've done New York. Ran my first marathon 4 months after my daughter was born. She's 6.5. And I've just kind of kept going further and further since then. And just finished Moab 240 3 weeks ago.
This is a long list of accomplishments in a very short amount of time. But I'm going to start with chemistry and yoga. That is perhaps a combination I'm going to use in the future when I'm talking about difficult teachers to replace. It used to be French and math as the combination, but I think chemistry and yoga is going to take over as the new example of a difficult position to replace. Why chemistry and yoga?
Well, chemistry, because really chemistry is the fundamental science of everything. So like biology, if you break it all down, it all has to do with chemistry. And then yoga, it just became a passion of mine when I started like practicing yoga and then went to yoga teacher training and then spent 3 years in India or 3 summers. And my students actually were the ones that knew that I had gone to India. And I would talk about meditation with them and things like that. And they asked me to bring yoga to Jordan District. And so they said, if we go around to get enough signatures, will you write the program or get it to Jordan District or get it into the high school? Can you teach it here? And so I said, yeah, sure, go get signatures. I'll see what I can do. So they did, and I went to the district and presented yoga, and they got it on the catalog, and now we have yoga. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's very impressive, and it's exciting that the students were the ones that were behind adding yoga to your schedule.
Yeah, I give them the credit. Absolutely.
Well, you've had a wide variety of experience, and like I said, a wide range of expertise. I want to talk a little bit about the running. Now, you said that you started just after your daughter was born, just a few months after. So you've been running for about 6 years, is that right?
Well, I ran cross country in high school, but then I got Lyme disease, and it wreaked havoc on my system. So I stopped running for a lot of years. And then I would do like little runs here and there. I got more into cycling. It was easier on my joints. I got more into yoga because it was a lot gentler on my body. And then I kind of was always told I wouldn't be able to have children. And so when I was pregnant and I had my daughter, I started running. And then I got up to like 10 miles, and I was like, if I could do 10, I just think I'm going to do a marathon. And, like if I can have a kid, I can run a marathon. And Boston bombing also happened during that time, and it like ignited something in me. And I was kind of like, I'd never wanted to run a marathon before that. And I just kind of was like, this sort of like runner in me, like runners unite. It just created like this emotional thing inside of me that I was like, I want to run the Boston Marathon. And so I was running with my daughter, like when I was pregnant, and then Yeah, she was born in January, and I ran my first one, I believe it was like June 14th.
Okay, again, you just jam-packed a whole bunch of things into that short little conversation, because most people, in my experience, me included, don't say, I just reached this 10-mile goal. If I can do that, I can for sure do more than double that. And I can for sure do it after I just had a child that no one thought that I could have, and overcoming Lyme disease. I mean, there's a lot of things that you've overcome in your life. Many people probably don't understand the impact of Lyme disease, and I understand that yours went undiagnosed for a long time. So can you just tell me about that obstacle first?
Sure. So it went undiagnosed for probably about 10 years. And I never had a bite. I just started to have a lot of, like, the digestive issues, the weight loss, the arthritic pains, the chattering in the mind, the constant headaches. It kind of just sort of felt like I was hit by a truck all the time, and it was a struggle just to kind of like go from A to B. And then I got to the point where I was kind of like, this isn't living, because I didn't feel good. I felt like I didn't want to go on, and that's when I found yoga. And yoga brought me to India, and their approach was different. Their approach was, you spent so many years breaking down, trying to like kill all of this. Well, now we need to build your system back up. So they were like herbs and treatments to open up the energy channels in the body, replace it with herbs to build the systems, rebuild the organs, get you strong again. So
tell us about coming back to running after all of that.
Running has always been what I love. So even in high school, like, I was top of the cross-country team, and like I started running in middle school, and it's just always been it's a stress relief, it's mental happiness. It's like it's my self-love. Like, running is my love of self. And before I was diagnosed with Lyme's, because he said, you know, your body's so damaged, you'll never be able to run a marathon. I used to like drive down the street and see people running and be so sad, because that's all I wanted to do. So when I had my daughter and I started running, and then when I ran my first marathon was a big joke. Like, I was on par to get a BQ, and I just didn't take the electrolytes that I needed to, and I bonked really bad, and I made it to the finish line, but it was not a pretty finish. But I learned a lot. And I know that this is going to come back.
Bonking is the technical term for hitting the wall, right?
Hitting the wall, bonking, yeah. And I know it'll come back to this, but like, I am an educator, and I am really real, at least I want to be with my students. And like, I tell them all the time, don't be afraid of failure. Like, failure makes you better. And I learn way more from my failures than I ever did any of my successes, and that's so true. Like, I learned so much from my first marathon, because I realized, even though I'm a chemistry teacher, you know, what you learn in the classroom, you don't necessarily take out of the classroom. And I knew about electrolytes, but for some reason I was like, oh, I'll get enough. Like, I'll get enough on the course. And I didn't. And so, like, that first marathon, I bonked it really bad. And that was my first marathon over 4 hours. And then I learned a ton from it, you know. And then I went to Boston, I think, the following year. So from my first ultra marathon, my first 100-miler, I made some really, really, really big mistakes. And I went back the following year to that same one, shaved 5 hours off my time, and got third place female.
5 hours off your time?
Yeah, so that's, like, I tell my students all the time, like, failure is good. You know, you fail and you learn. So, like, this last summer, I had some of my issues from my Lyme kind of came back. And in June, I almost hung up my racing shoes. I ran the Wasatch course on my own. Like, I had some pacers and a wonderful crew, but it was just me, because it was canceled this year, so I ran it anyways. and I didn't throw up. And I always throw up the last 33 miles of that race. And I didn't throw up. And I was like, it gave me the confidence. I was like, okay, maybe Moab will go well. And Moab was really, really hot this year. And I got behind on my hydration because I read the water chart wrong, and I didn't have enough water. So I got behind, and I started to get really sick on that first day. And I was like, oh,
now,
great.
This is day one of the race where you set a record.
I didn't set a record.
Well,
I was the
fourth.
fourth. I was the
fourth is a record.
fastest. Okay.
Perhaps for you, first is the only record that counts.
Okay.
But to me, fourth overall of all time, that's pretty freaking awesome.
Thank you. So, yeah, I got really sick that first day, and I problem solved it, and I didn't let it destroy my race. And I said, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to walk. I'm going to try to get this under control. When I made it into my first crew station at mile 72, I wasn't going to sleep, but I slept for half an hour, and then I woke up and I threw up everything, and I felt great, and so I didn't have any other issues for the rest of the race. So, and I think what changed is as I made that decision, I'm not going to keep pushing. I'm going to sleep for 30 minutes. I'm going to tell my body that, if you feel bad, I'm going to rest.
So the thing that's remarkable to me as I listen to overcoming the illness and overcoming obstacles even within day one of a race is that you're always thinking about, what does this obstacle mean, how can I solve it, and how can I get around it and just keep moving. And I do think that's a great lesson for your students. You're the embodiment of just continuing to try even when things don't go your way.
Absolutely, 100%. And I mean, I'm not a good teacher because I'm awesome in my content. I know my stuff, but I value relationships, and I share a lot of my life experiences, especially with my yoga kids. I tell them, if you become more flexible, awesome. If you become stronger, awesome. But what I really care about is that you learn, you have more tools in your toolbox for when life gets hard, because it will. You can pull stuff from that. I want to teach you to learn to have a relationship with yourself, to gain some mental strength, because that's what's going to help you when life gets tough.
When you finish this race, you're running along at a 10-minute mile clip. Is that correct?
There might have been, at the end, there was some sections that I was definitely pushing. I wasn't able to hold that pace for the whole race, obviously, but I was super impressed with how my body was able to continue to push some pretty fast miles. When I came into aid station 37, and they were like, wow, good job, you're first female. And I was like, yeah, it's 37 miles in. There's a long race to go. I don't even, tell me that at mile 200, right? So the whole time I was like, I don't want to know what place I'm in, because I didn't. I was doing my race, and I told my pacers that, I told my crew that. I was like, this is my race, and there were definite lows, but I had a lot of fun. And I know people are like, that's crazy. How can you have fun running 240 miles? I had a lot of fun. I was cracking jokes with my crew. I was singing, belting out loud with my music. I had a lot of fun. I had some lows. I felt like crying at the very end. I felt like swearing a few times. There were some bad times, but I always knew that at the bottom of a low there was always going to be a high, because that's life. When I say ultramarathons are like life, and for anyone listening, if you are in a really bad place, or if life isn't going super well, it will get better, you know? So I just always knew that if I was in a really bad place, that eventually it was going to turn around.
Well, and it's good advice. It's obvious that you have a lot of hope. And just that you're able to say, it's going to get better, and you're able to see past that difficult time, which is something that we're all trying to do right now. And I do think that important component of not just saying, it is going to get better, but also I have a hand in trying to do that, and I need to think about a lot of different ways I can attack the problem. I really admire that, and I'm so glad that your students are in your class and able to get that message.
Thank you.
You also wrote a book. Tell us about the book that you wrote.
Yeah, it's kind of been, it was in my head for a while, and you know, like when I run, it's kind of like my meditation time when I just sort of like let thoughts flow.
Is it hard to run with a little notebook in your hand and a pencil?
You know, and people had said that, like, you should run with a notebook and a pencil, and I was like, because I would sort of write in my head as I was running, but I'm a pretty private person, or I used to be, especially in terms of my health.
Sure.
I didn't tell people that I had Lyme disease. Just because I always kind of viewed that people would see me and think I was a weak individual. And so I did never tell people. I didn't want people to look at me differently. And so writing it took a lot of courage. And I wasn't quite sure if I was ready to put that out there. And then I just set down my laptop down and I started writing, and like, you know, I would just write like all day long. And, you know, with chapter 1, after the prologue, it took so much out of me that I was like, I need to go for a run, and just to kind of like get off of this table. And I had felt like I had just ran an ultra marathon. I was so tired. I was just like, because all this like stuff that I had been holding on to for so long and I just put on paper was just like this heaviness, you know. And I just kind of felt like it was time, you know. And I kind of always say if I can help one person, then I've done my job. So I know that there's been a few of my students have read it, and they've reached out to me and were like, you know, I looked up to you before, and now like I respect you, and you've taught me a lot. And I've had other people, you know, write to me and say that I've like helped them.
Obviously you have some great accomplishments in your life, but there are a lot of great accomplishments to come. And I'm just thrilled that our students here at Herriman get to know you and get to know the attitude that you've brought to life.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for spending time with us. Thanks for joining us on the Supercast. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. And remember, education is the most important thing you will do today. We'll see you out there.